Everywhere she goes, Oh-Young Hallyu is followed. What she buys, how she behaves, is tracked and scored to show how responsible and trustworthy she is. It's called the social credit system. A person's reputation is scored on a scale of 350 to 950. It's big data meets Big Brother, expanding how the government monitors, understands, and ultimately controls its 1.4 billion citizens.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
And information collectors are paid to report on their neighbors.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens. Among them is this journalist. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. He was blacklisted. He only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
By using the mechanism of social credit, we'll be able to establish a blacklist of people. These punishments will serve as a whip to rebuild moral values.
And few here are willing to criticize it, something that may pose a risk itself for a bad score and the life that comes with it.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
China wants obedient citizens. Criticism or resistance among the population is virtually non-existent.
This woman's door was kicked in by police when she refused to go to quarantine.
Now, these videos show rows of metal containers which are being used to house COVID-19 patients. Some of them have complained that very little food is left for them in the freezing metal boxes.
Chinese government officials now installing fences in Shanghai, blocking people from leaving their homes.
For some, Shanghai feels like the world's largest prison.
5分钟前头，叫俺没几个人，现在突然之间，所有人都叫了。
How does a handful of autocrats gain total control over a population of 1.4 billion?
I have 2 master degrees, one in clinical psychology, one in statistics. And in the beginning of the crisis, I started to study the statistics a little bit. The initial mathematical models and the initial statistics all had dramatically overrated the dangerousness of the virus. That was the moment when I started to think how it was possible that an entire society and an entire population was in the grip of a narrative which in many respects was blatantly wrong. After a few months it became clear to me that the only mechanism that could explain what was happening in society was what is usually referred to as mass formation. Mass formation is identical to hypnosis. And this term refers to a specific kind of group formation, which has very special characteristic effects at the level of individual mental functioning. And one of these effects is that an individual that is in the grip of mass formation typically lose every capacity to take a critical distance from what they believe in, from what the group believes in.
You would think it would be people with lower IQs that would be more susceptible to this, but it seems to be the other way around. Are you seeing this?
I have seen this, and it does seem to be predicted by educational status and IQ.
We look to be verified for our belief system, right? And so a doctor goes to the CDC. The CDC says this is true, it must be true, I'm staying in that zone. It's actually people outside of the system go, well, I want to challenge the CDC here for a second. Where's this study come from? Where's it, and that's what I do.
All of these people were kept out of the conversation.
All I can comment
and you were
there,
wanting me to sign onto a social contract where the scientific method isn't being used.
I'm not interested in medical pedigree, I'm interested in medical consensus.
People who are highly intelligent tend to go and get a lot of degrees. Those people have spent so many years in institutions to get those degrees that they have developed a trust and confidence in not only the educational institutions, but those that support them, which are largely government bodies. And so they start from the place of, if it's told by the university, by the government, it's probably going to be true.
What I've learned about science is that it's really imagined, they're looking at like a fragment of the world, and it's all they see. It's all they're looking at. The world, they don't see the world.
So I think that there's a disconnect between people who are smart and have lots of degrees with actual reality, with the lived experience of nature, of life, that you don't see with people who are actually working with their hands outdoors all of the time.
A mass formation typically emerges in a society when very specific conditions are met. First and for all, the most central condition is a major part of the population needs to feel lonely.
Doctors say the very rules to keep people safe from the virus are doing great damage when it comes to anxiety, depression, and even suicide. And now everyone is suffering, but children are particularly at risk.
The real pandemic here is the psychological warfare that's being waged on every single human being. See, if you take a human being and you put them in a chronic fear state, and you couple that with human isolation, what happens, they psychologically decompensate and live in such emotional pain that they will gravitate in an irrational way to anything that you promise them will alleviate that pain.
Once people feel disconnected from their environment, they will typically start to experience a lack of meaning-making in life. And under these conditions, if a narrative is distributed through the mass media, indicating an object of anxiety and a strategy to deal with this object of anxiety, they suddenly, connect to one small object of fear, for instance, the coronavirus, and afterwards, people don't feel lonely anymore. They feel connected again.
Let me hear it if you've had the Pfizer vaccine. Let me hear it from Moderna, AstraZeneca. Let's hear it from the anti-vaxxers.
The new kind of social bond is highly problematic, just because the connections between the individuals even deteriorate more, and the bond between the individual and the collective becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, which make them willing to sacrifice everything for the collective. Its health, its wealth, the future of its children, everything. Something else that is really characteristic of individuals in mass formation is that they become radically intolerant for dissonant voices.
The people who are not getting vaccines, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind.
Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy, rest in peace, Wheezy.
Put your mask on! That's all you gotta do!
We have to stop coddling the morons who will not get the shot.
Get away from me,
Put it on. Does it bother anybody else that she doesn't have to wear a mask that we all do?
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country?
You're a schmuck for not wearing a mask.
And just say it's mandatory to get vaccinated.
Screw your freedom.
People who do not go along with the masses are stigmatized, and in the end, the masses are inclined to destroy the people who do not go along with them. And they do so as if it is an ethical duty to do so.
Getting good people to do bad things, harmful things, while thinking they're good things, it's a dangerous place to be because it looks great. You feel great while you're being used.
They will sacrifice themselves, and they see it as a virtue because it demonstrates their complete obedience to the cult, to the group, to perform ritualistic behavior which causes them harm.
One of the most clear illustrations of this was when the leaders of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union were sentenced to death, often tortured to death. They did not object. They said things like, if this helps the Communist Party, it's my pleasure to do it. That's something that was observed in all major examples of mass formation in history.
I was born in Communist China 2 years before Mao started his Cultural Revolution. So we had to be indoctrinated and chanting slogans and holding Chairman Mao's little red books to say, long live Chairman Mao, long live Communist Party.
Inspired by Soviet Union dictators Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin, China's communist leader, Mao Zedong, borrowed from the playbook of the Russian Revolution. To fight anti-communist forces, Lenin organized a military branch of his Communist Party, known as the Red Army. Following suit, Mao branded his army the Red Guards. However, Mao's soldiers were not enlisted from his military. His Red Guards were made up of high school and university students.
So he used young people to start cultural revolution, to top down statues, burning old buildings, and demonize all religions, going after all dissident voices, and to turn all the Chinese against each other, family turn on each other, neighbors turn on each other.